Brittany was always a good friend of mine. We grew up together, went to the same school together. In fact, you could probably say that we were the best of friends. As I got older, I realized that, well, she had become pretty. And as you can probably imagine, when she asked me to take care of her dog while she and her parents went on vacation, I needed to say yes. I knew that it was going to be a really tough swing with my parents, but it was something I had to do. I mean, that's what friends do, right? Somehow, parents don't seem to get that. The very moment I mentioned it to my parents, I knew that what they were going to say. They'd say I wasn't responsible enough, or that I never picked up my clothes off the floor, never hung a towel behind the door after a shower. How in the world would I have the responsibility of taking care of a dog that I hardly knew? It was exactly what they said, just that their words were louder. I pleaded. I told them exactly what I would do, how I would do it, and how they wouldn't be bothered by any of it. I told them that I'd entered a new stage in life, and that the old me had seen the error in his ways. I laid it on thick, and after days of bickering, they bought it. They gave in. There was no way that I'd mess this up. This was my chance. It was my duty to make sure that I showed them how responsible I really was. I mean, I did everything. I cleaned the dog, I walked him, I fed him, I even made sure that I wiped his paws before coming into the house. He was right at the foot of my bed every night. I was a perfect dog sitter. I mean, there was really nothing to it. I lived across the street from the park, and well, all I had to do was cross the street, take him to the favorite tree, and then walk right back. Having a dog was not that difficult. However, after a few days, you could imagine that it started to become a little bit tiring. Quickly, I realized that it was a bad idea, a horrible experience. But little did I know that the most horrible experience lay shortly ahead. It was 3:37 a.m., a peculiar hour in the middle of the night. I'll never forget that hour. I know now why they call it the devil's hour. I felt was the brush of a wet nose. At first, I thought it was a wicked dream, an ugly one at that. I opened my eyes, and yes, it was the dog asking to go for a walk at the ungodly hour of 3:37 in the morning. There really wasn't anything I could do, and if I didn't act quick enough, I'd spend my time sopping up dog mess in my room, and that would be a horrible job to do in the middle of the night, so I went ahead. I looked outside my window, and of course, as luck would have it, it was snowing. There must have been at least 4 inches of snow out there, and the large flakes suggested that the worst was yet to come. So I got my boots, put on my jacket, and quietly opened my bedroom door, which led to the kitchen. I had to do this in a stealthy type of way. I wouldn't want my parents to wake up, so I quietly walked the dog outside and gently shut the door behind me. The carpet of snow absorbed all the unusual sounds of the outdoors, and it felt like I was walking into a Norman Rockwell painting. Everything was calm. You couldn't hear a thing. It was eerily silent, but beautiful. There was not one footstep, not one. The lights of the park were softened because of the snow that covered them. A darkened winter wonderland, and I was reluctantly in it. The dog sniffed his way toward his usual tree, but never stopped. He oddly continued forward, as if searching for something. I tolerated his curiosity and gazed at the surroundings. I saw the covered trees and bushes and park benches, and it was then, in the distance, when I saw it. At first, it looked like a large pile of snow on a park bench, but as I squinted and stared, I realized it wasn't. The dog pulled me closer to the bench. What looked like an obscure pile of snow turned out to be the most horrifying image that I've ever seen. It was a woman in a sleeveless wedding dress. Snow all around her. It was everywhere. Snow covered her feet, her back, and all you saw were the ends of her long black hair. She stared at the floor with her head in her hands, as if she was crying, though I didn't hear a sound. There were no footsteps leading to the bench, which probably meant that she had been there for quite some time. I reluctantly let the dog pull me closer, closer to the bench, closer to her. He started to growl as the leash tightened the collar around his neck. I started pulling him back, away from the woman. But then something drew me closer to her. I was about 5 feet away from her, dreadfully scared. My heart raced, but I felt I needed to ask if everything was okay. And so I did. "Excuse me, is everything okay? Are you all right?" And I had no response. It kind of got me wondering if she was even alive. Could she have been frozen? Then I asked again, in a louder tone, "Is everything all right? Can I help you with anything?" It was at that point that the blood seemed to drain from my face. My heart raced like never before. She slowly lifted her head from her hands and looked at me. Her eyes looked soulless, sad, downturned, almost lifeless. What happened next I'll never forget. She reached toward me with an extended arm and said, "Honey, I waited for you. I waited so long for you. Did you bring it? Did you bring the ring?" I looked at her. I didn't know what to say. So I said, "Excuse me? You have the wrong person. Can I call someone for you? Is everything all right?" She looked again and repeated, "Did you bring the ring? You needed to bring the ring." And at that point, it started to scare me. Her eyebrows turned downward, and quickly she seemed incredibly angry. Her lips were dried and cracked, and the thick purple veins in her hands seemed to bulge by the second, almost like they were going to pop. I pulled the dog back, and it too started walking quickly towards the house, away from this woman, as if he was also afraid. As we walked away, I constantly looked back over my shoulder, looking at the woman in the wedding dress. As we left, her image shrank into the distance. I saw her look at me the whole time, and when I looked once more, her head was back to resting on her hands, and again, she returned to looking like a peculiar mound of snow in the distance. I went up the stairs, dusted off my boots, and quietly opened the door and walked back into my room. I bent down the window shade and tried to see her, but it was hardly possible. The snow was coming down in a more furious way, and it seemed that I was looking through a white sheet. I lay down and I stared at the ceiling. I thought about what I just saw. What just happened in the middle of the night? I really didn't know what to do. I certainly wasn't going to wake up my parents, and I had no one to call, so I laid there. And when I looked over at the clock, I realized it was 4:47 in the morning, and I was wide awake. The dog laid calmly at the foot of my bed, and I tossed and turned until I heard the chair move in the kitchen. I was happy to have heard that, because I knew that one of my parents was up. No doubt they would have seen the wet footprints from my boots in the kitchen. I felt I needed to get up and explain. I felt I needed to tell them what I saw, what exactly happened, even if they wouldn't believe me. So I got up and went to the bedroom door, and as I opened it, I saw her. She sat on the chair in the middle of the kitchen, her head on her hands facing the floor, and muttering the same words. "Did you bring the ring? Where's the ring? Did you bring the ring?" And when she looked up, I saw her blood-filled eyes, her cracked lips, and her long, black, stringy hair. I was terrified, horrified. I didn't know what to do, what to say. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. It just wouldn't come out. So I did the only thing I could do. I ran back inside my room and I shut the door. And then it became worse. The pounding and pounding on my door didn't stop. She kept on repeating, asking for the ring. Where was the ring? I had no idea what to tell her. And so I screamed for her to leave. Leave me alone. Well, after a while, the pounding got louder and louder. Her voice got louder and louder. And then from one second to the next, it stopped. She stopped screaming. She stopped banging. All of a sudden, everything was over. I waited for 15 minutes. I waited in the darkness, in silence. I didn't move. I didn't dare move. I felt that my breathing was too loud, so I held my breath. I didn't hear the door open. I didn't hear her leave, so I was doubtful. I was scared, but after 15 minutes, I slowly went to the door. I unlocked it, and I opened it very slowly. Inch by inch, I opened the door and looked toward where she was sitting. There was no one there. After a few minutes, I gained the courage to open the door wider. I stepped into the kitchen. I looked around, and there was nothing there. My heart began to beat normally, and I felt that everything was back to normal. I turned around to go back into my room. My eyes widened and I screamed, but nothing seemed to come out. She was standing on the corner of my bed with a rope tied around her neck, which was fastened to the ceiling fan above. She pointed at me with her blood-filled eyes, screaming, "Where's the ring? Did you bring the ring?" And then she stepped off the corner of my bed, hanging herself as she swung from left to right, her head facing the floor. Her hands hung limp at her side, her wedding dress brushing my bedroom floor. My heart thumped as I screamed. I called for my parents, but it was difficult. It was almost like my voice was blocked. And then I felt something grab my shoulders, shaking me violently. It was then when I woke up and I saw my mother. Her voice was muffled, but then became clearer and clearer. "You're having a bad dream. Wake up. You're having a bad dream." I woke up and I looked around. You could only imagine my relief. There was no woman in a wedding dress. There was no rope tied to the ceiling fan. Everything was normal. I took a deep breath of relief and I got up and started getting ready for school as my mother made breakfast for me and my father. As I sat down at the kitchen table, the deafening sounds of sirens overwhelmed the morning silence. My parents ran to the window and saw patrol cars and ambulances and their crimson blinking lights as they shined off the blanket of snow outside. They both ran out to the front porch, which was covered in snow, their faces contorted from shock. In the distance was a woman in a white wedding dress hanging by her neck from a tall oak tree in the middle of the park. To this day, I'm cursed with waking up at 3:37 in the morning, hoping not to see the woman in the wedding dress. 3:37 in the morning is a peculiar hour, an hour which I now refer to as the devil's hour.